Jackson Podcast.
What's good with y'all today, man? So one of the young brothers I be chopping it up with, conversing with about historical topics and, the structure of the United States with the financial structure and a few things, man, that's just I feel like is necessary to converse with the young brothers. I'm 45 years old and I think that history is important. I think being knowledgeable about yourself and your own and your past is important also. And when I think about this topic in this video he sent me, it's about the black basketball leagues you never heard of. I have did some research on this before, but I'm wanting to be shocked by this video of some information that I never heard of, that I never thought existed. But what's crazy to me is that one point in time we had black basketball leagues, black baseball leagues. We had more ownership before we integrated. When we was segregated, we was dependent upon each other. But when we integrated, we became a part of their financial structure. Not saying that what they did was wrong. What they did was genius, actually, to integrate people into their way of living, their society. But this conversation came up because, I had a, a, a short that did real well on the channel as of recently, and it was about Ja Morant. And I was talking about he needs to be obedient. He needs to be not so dysfunctional. He needs to conform. Basically, that's basically what I was saying. But I had a few people that they got at me. They got at me, and they might have had a point. But I feel as if when you're going into somebody else's home, you got to be respectful, or they're gonna get you gone. Now you can get into these things, these jobs, these corporate entities. You can become a part of the FBI. You can be a part of a basketball league. But their structure, why they've lasted 100 years, 75 years, 80 years, it's because they structure. If you get out of line with their structure, they will remove you. You can't go to the military and be militant against the military. You can't go to the NFL and be militant against the NFL. They're gonna remove you. But if that's what you want to do to set a point and a statement, that's cool. But I just wanted to lay that out because this is how this conversation came about. And I'm going to look at this video and I'm going to give y'all my perspective on it, man. Let's get right to it. The Black Basketball League you never heard of.
Basketball is now an international sport, but it has its roots in 1891 with James Naismith, a Canadian-American physical education teacher. Designed to keep his students active during the winter, the game initially used a soccer ball and 2 peach baskets. Naismith created the game with 13 basic rules, forming a solid structural framework that still influences the game today. His efforts led to basketball inclusion as an organized sport in the 1936 Olympic Games and set the stage for the formation of the National Basketball Association in 1949. However, for black players, especially in the early 20th century, basketball, much like the broader American society, was heavily racially segregated. White players predominantly occupied the professional scene, and despite immense talent, African American players faced systemic barriers and were excluded from the major leagues. In response to this, black communities could create their own spaces. They embraced basketball as a means to foster social cohesion and enhance community pride and establish their own distinct identity. This movement was significantly influenced by a man by the name of Edwin Henderson, known as the godfather of black basketball. In 1904, Henderson introduced basketball to African Americans in Washington, D.C. through segregated public school physical education classes. Following his studies at Harvard University, he saw the sport as a means to improve public health and advance civil rights by challenging stereotypes that black people were inferior. This laid the initial foundation for the Black Five era that expanded from around 1904 into the 1950s. In those early days, basketball was not immediately popular with African Americans. They regarded it as a sissy game. But Henderson's efforts would pay off, and by 1906, he had founded an interscholastic athletic association of the Mid-Atlantic states to promote competition and intercollegiate and interscholastic athletes. This led to the formation of several all-black basketball teams in New York City and Washington, D.C., which would become the early centers of black basketball. The first independent black basketball team was the Smart Set Athletic Club of Brooklyn. Established in 1907, this team won the first colored basketball world championship in 1907-1908 season. The first intercity competition between black teams would take place in December of 1908 between the Smart Set Athletic Club and the Crescent Athletic Club of Washington, D.C., with the Brooklyn team emerging victorious. In the fall of 1910, Major A. Hart, a former manager of the St. Christopher Club, launched the New York All-Stars, the first all-black professional basketball team. Hart saw basketball as both entertainment and a revenue opportunity, emphasizing fair, fast, clean play to popularize the sport amongst black people. By the 1912-1913 season, inner city competition was thriving in the black community, and teams from Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and New York frequently competed alongside college teams at Howard, Hampton, and Lincoln. This network soon expanded to the Midwest, and teams often had ties to local churches and athletic clubs and businesses and papers and YMCA branches, relying on community support for funding essentials like equipment, uniforms, and travel. This era laid the groundwork for the sport's expansion into the 1920s. So by 1923, Robert Douglas would establish the New York Renaissance, known as the Rens. The team was named after the Renaissance Casino and Ballroom in Harlem, where they played their inaugural game November of 1923 against an all-white team, the Collegiate Five. This venue, owned by the Sarko Realty Company and William Roach, allowed its dance floor to double as a basketball court. And despite not having an ideal site for basketball, the Wrens adapted the small, slippery floor, which was decorated with chandeliers and a bandstand. Before and following games, as well as at halftime, patrons would enjoy performances by bands like Duke Ellington and Ella Fitzgerald. Basketball games at this time served as one segment of the evening's entertainment, and this prompted Black Five-era teams to cultivate a faster, engaging, more entertaining style of play than their white counterparts. However, by the time of the Great Depression, dance halls would fall out of favor, and by 1928, the Wrens were traveling to the Northeast, reaching the Midwest by the 1930s, later barnstorming across the South. By 1931, they had formed an exceptional team called the Magnificent Seven, and from 1932 to 1936, they established an impressive record of 495 to 58, including an 88-game winning streak in 1933. Yet, their success came with several challenges. The Wrens often traveled for months, covering thousands of miles, playing nightly, sometimes twice on Sundays. They often had to sleep in their bus due to local segregation laws. They also faced biased refereeing and hostile crowds. They had a strategy called the Get Up 10, which would account for the number of points that the biased refs would cost them on that night. Yet the Wrens would continue to dominate the court, but they weren't the only Black Five team. There was the Washington Bears, another significant team led by founder and coach Ed Gottlieb, who also was the co-founder of the Basketball Association of America, which is the predecessor to the NBA, and Gottlieb also coached the original Philadelphia Warriors, which would later become the Golden State Warriors. The Bears were known for their skill and competitive spirit, and they frequently triumphed over white-dominated teams, forcing audience and critics alike to acknowledge the skill and ability of Black basketball players. Similarly, the Globetrotters, founded in 1926 by Abe Saperstein, gained fame for their unique blend of athleticism and entertainment. Their performances included competitive games mixed with comedy and trick shots, establishing them as international ambassadors for basketball and helping challenge racial stereotypes. They were so popular that in the 1940s, the Harlem Globetrotters often staged double headers with the Basketball Association of America to help keep the league afloat. Yet despite this, they faced numerous challenges and issues. First, Financial issues were an almost constant burden. Teams relied heavily on community donations to cover essential costs like equipment, uniforms, and travel, and venue rentals. Sponsorship opportunities were scarce, leading to financial instability that sometimes resulted in teams simply disbanding overnight.
I'm gonna continue to play the video. It's not much left of it, y'all. It's about 3.5 minutes left, but I got to give a couple of takes because it's interesting. You know, we create a lot of things, we popularize a lot of things, and the white supremacists, they monetize things. I want us to get to that point to where we monetizing more things as a people and less creating, even though the creative gene is so valuable because you influence and you're influential to everyone. But the monetization is what's needed to further the race, the culture, and the people. What caught my attention about this conversation that has been had so far is that through 1904 to 1936, it was a black basketball league that was owned by black people in totality. That's 32 years. And after that, they're still talking about struggling for finances after 32 years of ownership. Now, what comes to my mind also is that it was more entertaining. They was beating up on the other people, the other racial makeup groups, but it wasn't worth nothing financially. So, why did we stop completely? Was it a struggle to keep the league ongoing? Because I feel like, if it's something of value, then the league should continue on forever. But business is business. Some people want to move along, some people want to stop. So everybody don't want to fight. Everybody don't want to fight forever. So I understand, but I don't understand at the same time because something that's that valuable, having your own league, I can imagine how popular it would have been by now. But another thing that's crazy, we still do have black owned leagues right now, like the big three, like the one-on-one league, like the two-on-two league Tracy McGrady involved in. And it still can't eclipse the multi-billion dollar league. It's not as entertaining, it's not as invested in. It's just interesting to see that. And then also another thing that caught my attention before we finish off and play the clip is that Edwin Henderson in 1904, through a physical education class, introduced basketball in Washington, D.C. during one of his classes. Uh, and that's how the Black League was created, through Edward Henderson. That's interesting, man, because he learned it somewhere else and then he brought it back home to his people and we popularized it and made it great, made it big. At first, and when I first played this video, they said basketball was segregated. They didn't want black people playing in the league. They didn't want black people playing on the team. You know, it seemed as if before Martin Luther King integrated us and had the masses of people in our race integrate with the Caucasian race or the American government or federal structure or whatever it was that he integrated us with, it seemed like we was thriving on our own. We dressed different, we walked different, we presented ourselves different. If you look at those pictures in the 60s, people dressed better in the 60s than they do in 2025 because people had integrity, something to stand on, something they believed in, a future that they was fighting for us. Now you see folks walking around with their pants sagging with slides on. You see girls dressed like little boys out here. It's just a different time. And back then, those people kept their car clean. They wore suits and dresses and tuxedos and fur hats and mink coats, and they was just swagged up. They had more that they was standing on and fighting for. But when integration happened and we joined other leagues, it seemed like only a few people became successful and financially stable, and then the rest of the people was just thrown in the trash can. Now, before I play the rest of the clip, I want to ask y'all a question. Do y'all think that that's true? Because a lot of cultures take credit for what we create, And not saying that we did create basketball, but did James Naismith really create basketball? A Canadian man. If y'all have the information on that, let me know. Send me the information. I want to know if James Naismith really was the creator of basketball in Canada. Get back to the video, man.
For instance, the low-end Big Five lost their sponsorship because they couldn't secure enough big game dates to sustain their expenses. Moreover, these teams played in adverse conditions, contending with hostile crowds and biased refs, especially during away games. They frequently endured racial slurs and name calling. The travel was fraught with the risk of racial violence. Sometimes the Black Five teams had to compete against white teams under altered rules with biased officiating. And ironically, many teams would prefer white officials to black referees due to skepticism about impartiality. Additionally, finding sustainable venues was a constant struggle. Some teams even had to play on rooftops exposed to the weather and the elements. Conflicts with amateur and professionalism further complicated the situation as the need to win clashed with the necessity of compensating their players. Additionally, black teams received significantly less media coverage. Often that media coverage was negative compared to their white counterparts. Ultimately, the decline of the Black Five was because of changes in professional sports that were taking place during that time. By the 1940s, integration of basketball had signaled the end for Black Five teams. The National Basketball League merged with the Segregated Basketball Association of America to form the NBA in 1949, with the inclusion of black players in the 1950s, with trailblazers like Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain coming soon after, paving the way for future generations. The financial struggles and limited resources of Black Five teams, combined with diminished interest as more black players joined the NBA, led to these teams' continued decline. In the end, the New York Reds compiled an impressive 2,318 and 381 record before the team would disband in 1949. Later, the 1933 version of the Wrens was recognized by being collectively named to the Basketball Hall of Fame in 1963. The Black Five era was a crucial yet often overlooked chapter in basketball history, reflecting the contributions black teams had on early basketball. These teams emerged during a time of racial segregation when black athletes were excluded from predominantly white leagues. The Black Five's independent basketball teams were instrumental in showcasing their talent and fostering the sport's growth, both in the black community and in America as a whole. The legacy of the Black Five also extends beyond the on-court achievements, offering a source of inspiration and a catalyst for social change. Their success challenged racial barriers and paved the way for the integration of sports as a whole and affected the broader athletic community. In 2005, the contributions that these pioneering teams made were formally recognized by the United States Congress, highlighting their enduring influence on basketball and American society.
I want to give that brother his credit because I frequent his content, and I'm going to be reacting to a couple of more videos from him this week. I'm going to be releasing them soon this week. One Mic History. Go check out his channel. Go subscribe to his channel. Phenomenal historical content. Thank y'all for tuning into the show. My last take that I want to speak about on this is that diminished interest is why the league stopped. It was shut down. That's what he said in this video, that the interest was diminished. You know, it's coming to a time right now to where in the NBA, it's not as many black people in it. You know, it's a lot of foreigners in it. They taking over the league, and I had a conversation with a couple of young guys who I frequent with. You know what I mean? With conversation, and they told me that, you know, people still want it. Unc, they be calling me Unc. Still, people still want it. People still want to make it to the league. People still want to play in the game. It's just that we have more responsibilities at home. Things are harder. Stuff costs more. Young boys is having to get jobs early and do this and do that. They said, I think that the people in those other countries, they grow up playing against grown men. They grow up with a easier lifestyle than over here in America. And I was telling him, I was like, nah, that's an excuse, youngin. I said, y'all can still be hungry and want to make it to the league and still make it to the league. And are y'all lacking the hustle? Are y'all wanting to play PlayStation too much? What's the problem? Why are these people coming over here outshining y'all? But with me saying all of that, diminished interest. Back to that, diminished interest. Is it something? What was it not marketed right? Why did people not be interested in the All Black League? And what makes them interested is the marketing in the NBA that popular and that powerful to make people want to watch the same people who was in the All Black League. It's just interesting, man. Uh, let's further the conversation in the comment section. I highly appreciate y'all for tuning in to the show, man. This was an interesting conversation. Thank y'all. Y'all have a blessed day. Peace, love, plenty of abundance. Make sure you go get you some money, and I'm gone. Chill.
The Trevor Jackson Podcast.